being here.
Good to be back.
So you are no stranger to us, and we appreciate that. But for those that may have forgotten, and they don't read NOLA.com, which you seem to be in every other day, what is the mission of MCC? Is that unusual for a place like New Orleans to have it? And you just got started in the position, right?
Yeah, 39 years ago.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And the organization is 73 years old. So this was created in 1952 by the business community in recognition that crime and corruption are disincentive to growth and affect prosperity.
So we've been doing this for a long time. We're professionals at crime and corruption.
Exactly. So,
okay.
So we are a byproduct of the business community wanting to hold public officials accountable and make this area more attractive so that everyone can prosper in the community. So our mission is pretty simple. We serve as a nonpartisan voice monitoring the criminal justice system. For 73 years, we've served as a conduit between the public and law enforcement. So people that have information about ethical, administrative, and criminal wrongdoing often are reluctant to go through the normal channels to report it. So the business community recognized that, and we were created to serve as that gap entity between the public and law enforcement, because business people that think they have information about wrongdoing are concerned of being retaliated against if they're identified as the whistleblower. So for 73 years, we have allowed people to tell us what's appropriate. The fact that I was a prosecutor for 5 years before I joined this organization, we will develop that information, and it's not just like a Crime Stoppers tip. If we get information, I know what investigators are looking for, I know what prosecutors are looking for. So we will write a report. In some instances, our reports may approach over 100 pages with supporting documentation. So law enforcement has rules that they have to apply by. And they need probable cause to open an investigation. And prosecutors need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So I understand what they're looking for. We will develop that, turn over our information to the agency, and in many instances, you're not going to know, the public isn't going to know of our involvement until there is an indictment, until there is a conviction where we'll be acknowledged in the last sentence, in the last paragraph of the press release by government. But just over the past, since 2015, we're looking at over 110 corruption-related felony convictions that were obtained, that were initiated with referrals by the Metropolitan Crime Commission.
That's amazing. So it seems like retaliation is a real thing in modern day and corruption. So how do you all stay out of it and stay safe and are able to continue to do your mission?
Well, I get that question from time to time, and I've been doing this for 39 years and I'm still here.
Does that mean you're corrupt? I mean, that's what I was,
no, it means that by the time the bad guys realize that we played a role in it, they have bigger fish, bigger problems in the Crime Commission, because we don't, unlike the news media gets information about ethical, administrative, criminal wrongdoing. They're going to trip over each other to be the first to break the news.
Okay.
Our protocol is a little bit different. We want to give it to an entity that allows them to be held accountable. And as a former prosecutor, I know that the element of surprise is something that is a real plus for law enforcement. So when we give them our reports, it allows them to go out and independently document the information that we provided. So by the time somebody knows that they're under investigation or having been indicted, it's because the people with badges are indicting them, and they have no idea that the referral came from the Crime Commission.
And then, so I think the easiest topic we'll cover today is just what has happened with crime, which would have been just the one topic we would have covered probably if it wasn't for the last couple of months. We saw a massive decline since 2019. You attributed it earlier this year to proactive policing. Is that still the stance? Is that where we brought down homicides. Are we different than the rest of the country on how we did that too?
Well, so crime nationally has been trending down, but just as when crime was trending up across the country, it was trending up at a much higher rate in the city of New Orleans. And the fact that it's down in New Orleans, it is exceeding the rate of decline for the rest of the country. So this is not a coincidence, not because of La Nina or El Nino trade winds blowing, the crime bug back and forth. It's really because I think the police department and their partners, the Louisiana State Police, have recognized that there's a finite number of offenders, and they have targeted the most violent and repeat felony offenders. And every unsolved crime of violence means that those offenders continue to be on the streets, and every unsolved crime means that crime is going to be perpetuated because those violent offenders are generalists, not just specialists. So today it's a crime of violence, tomorrow it's a property crime, the next week it's back to a crime of violence. So by arresting the individuals that are responsible for violent crime, they're also preventing crimes from occurring in the future because they're held behind bars. And we're looking at the inmate population. We're the only organization that actually monitors the entire criminal justice system. We issue reports on the police department, district attorney's office, judiciary, and the jail. So knowledge is power, and we don't base our positions just on our opinions. We're looking at the data to the extent that no other entity does. That's why the media comes to us in this, because what we're providing to the public via the media is to get a better appreciation of the performance, the cause and effect between crime and public safety.
It seemed like last time we talked about resourcing, and we talked about low numbers of police officers actually in NOPD and our inability to recruit. But sounds like it's a change of strategy by Chief Kirkpatrick and Troop NOLA. Is that fair?
Absolutely. So, what's happening right now, everyone knows that the police department's numbers are down 300 to 400 from what they need to optimally police the city.
That's still that 1,200 number. Is that?
Well, that's the number that was out there.
Okay.
We're on paper 900 officers, but that includes cadets that are waiting to join the academy and cadets that are in the academy. And by the time you start the academy, that's a 6-month program. Okay. And then it's another 4 months of field training after that. So in reality, we're probably closer to 800 officers than we are 900. And we're still bringing crime down. And that's because of, we have the addition of the Louisiana State Police. That's supposed to be a 40-member troop. That got started in this calendar year. And it started with about 8 troopers. Now we're looking at about 24 or so, and that includes their supervisors. The goal is 40 troopers. Right now we're looking at between 15 and 20% of the arrests that are being made in the city of New Orleans are made by the Louisiana State Police. When you dial 911, the NOPD responds to those calls for service. That's not what the state police are doing. So how are, essentially if you have 24 troopers, how do 24 troopers do what they're doing?
Right.
And what they're doing is they're strategically deploying their manpower in crime hotspots in conjunction and coordination with the police department to identify problems, and then they go out and they proactively engage and look for the violent and repeat offenders. The way they do it is by traffic enforcement and narcotics enforcement. You're saying, well, how do you bring down violent felony crime? By traffic enforcement.
Yeah, this doesn't sound like the consent decree holdback and problems that NOPD has. I mean, NOPD could have been doing this the whole time, no?
Well, they could have, and the consent decree doesn't preclude the police department from doing it, but the manpower staffing has limited the department's ability to engage in proactive policing because the calls for service are still at a volume that officers have to triage what they're responding to. And they're, triaging. Their priorities are crimes of violence, meaning that they don't have time to engage in proactive policing because literally the officers that are on patrol are bouncing from one call for service to the next. So the fact that crime is going down means that police officers have fewer calls to respond to, and the calls that they're responding to, they can get there on a more timely basis, and they have more time to devote to investigating those crimes. What the state police are doing by traffic enforcement and narcotics enforcement is that they're trained to look for traffic violations and narcotics. And the police department drives by narcotics transactions because they're busy trying to focus on responding to calls for service. And what state police are doing, they're stopping.
Got it.
And when they see someone that has violated a traffic violation, I've got the stats for the first 6 months of this year. They made over 800 traffic stops, but they only issued about 100 traffic citations. So when they stop someone for a traffic violation, that is the predication, the probable cause to pull them over. And if they determine it's just a traffic violator, they let them go with a warning.
Got it.
So the citations, the 100 citations that were issued to people that were arrested because there was a felony warrant out for their arrest, because they recovered drugs and guns and other things. And when state troopers put on their blue lights to pull someone over for a traffic violation,
they're going
and
to
they
get them.
take off,
They're going to be able to get them.
the troopers figure they have a bigger problem than a traffic violation. And many of those stops result in significant felony arrests, and these are individuals that are now taken off the streets. And that means that many of these individuals will remain in pretrial custody, which means that crime is down because they made those traffic stops and made those narcotics enforcement arrests that are out there. So, it's working together, and, we're fortunate to have the state police here. And with the state police here, it also means that the Attorney General's office is now prosecuting the arrests that are made by the state police. So just as we have too few police officers, we have too few assistant district attorneys. So this is allowing the district attorney's office and giving them some reinforcements so that they don't have to handle the backlog of cases that have flowed into the system since COVID.
Gotcha. We woke up on New Year's to, tragedy I think that we could never have imagined in this city with the terrorist attack that happened on Bourbon Street. Do you believe that we're safer, since then? What has changed? Has there been any sort of accountability in that process in your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, what happened on New Year's Day was horrific. There were 14 people that lost their life in that terrorist attack. Before that terrorist attack, there was one homicide. So on New Year's Day in the French Quarter, which is the 8th district, there were 15 homicides. There have been 0 homicides in the 8th district since New Year's Day. So homicides citywide in the city of New Orleans, including the 14 that occurred during the terrorist attack, are at 74 for the entire year. At the same point in time last year, there were, I think, 90 some odd homicides. So despite the fact that we had the horrendous event that occurred on January the 1st, homicides are down, even counting those, and it would be down even more were it not for that abnormality of the terrorist attack. So that tells you, when you look at the inmate population, you're looking at over 200 people that are in pretrial custody that are waiting to be tried on homicide charges. So that's 200 murderers that were taken off the streets that we're now having to deal with on the back end of the criminal justice system. There's a glut. There's 1,400 plus inmates in pretrial custody. 2/3 of them are in there for crimes of violence. They're in there because the police department and the state police have done their job in identifying them and arresting them. And not only are the investigators establishing probable cause, but their goal is not just to arrest, the goal is to convict,
right,
which means that the evidence needs to pass the scrutiny of the prosecutors, and the standard that a prosecutor applies is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the standard to convict. So those investigations that started with probable cause arrest are continuing in many instances post-arrest to develop the evidence that's necessary to convict. And that's a positive sign. It's how the system works together. And it wasn't working together in that way before. The police and the DA's office and the courts, they're all operating as silos. We issuing reports on every entity in the criminal justice system have forced the silos to be torn down, and now you're seeing unprecedented levels of cooperation, coordination existing between all the elements of the criminal justice system.
You want to talk a little bit about your report that you issued with the courts?
Yeah. So, one of the things that's unique about what we do is, as I mentioned, is we will issue reports on all the components of the criminal justice system. The least scrutinized component of the criminal justice system is the judiciary. So judges are used to...
Because nobody even knows who their judge they're voting for
exactly.
is. They're not on unknown names.
Exactly. So, in Orleans Parish, we have a full-time criminal court bench and we have a separate civil court bench. Very few people venture into criminal district court. If you're not a victim or a witness or a prospective juror, you're not going to venture into that building. You're not going to know what's going on. And if there is a judicial election, there'll be a lot of rhetoric. But one of the things that we do is we take a look at all of the cases that move through the system. So after arrest, the case goes to the DA's office. If the district attorney's office accepts charges, and now the attorney general's office, it goes to the court. The court has derived a fair and equitable way of distributing the workload randomly and equally to all judges via an allotment process. So that premise means that if the workload is equally distributed, there should not be disparity in the size of a judge's docket. And we just issued a report that showed there's 12 elected judges that preside over felony dockets in criminal district court. We looked at 3 years' worth of cases that went through that court system, over 5,000 cases that went through the system, and we issued this report. And what we found was the judge that had the lowest docket had about 112 open cases. The judge that had the largest docket had 412 cases. The American Bar Association recommends that 100% of the cases be concluded within 1 year. The judge that was most compliant with that standard she had about 20% of her docket that's over a year old. The judge that had the largest docket had 51% of those 412 cases were over a year old. And then you take a look at, we decided to put a monetary cost on that. So we took a look at every pretrial defendant that was under each judge's control. And we started the meter running from the time that they entered the system as an accepted case and allotted to that division of court or section of court to the time that we issued that report. The judge that had the lowest number of pretrial inmates was the judge, and you would expect it, with the lowest docket. And that cost taxpayers about $900,000. The judge with the longest inventory had the largest number of pretrial inmates, and that was over 200 pretrial inmates that were in his section of court at a cost of over $5 million to taxpayers. So after we released that report, officials from the Supreme Court reached out to us and said, what's going on in Section J? They asked us for that judge's inventory. So we amassed that. We turned it over to them, Officials from the Supreme Court made an unannounced visit to that judge to inquire what was going on in his section of court. The day after that visit, the judge requested medical leave. There is an ad hoc judge that was appointed to preside over his docket. A second ad hoc judge will be appointed in August. So our report went from describing a problem in the court to a solution now in place. The people that have the authority, the Supreme Court has supervisory authority over all the judges in the state of Louisiana. They noticed our report. This is information that would otherwise have not been available until we issued that report. That judge is no longer on the bench. His docket is going down, and the system is flowing. But one of the things that we noticed when we collected that data was yet another area. A month later, we issued a report on judge trial outcomes under Louisiana law. And I know this from my days as a prosecutor. Under Louisiana law, the defendant has the sole discretion to decide if they want to be tried for a felony by a judge or a jury. So as a prosecutor, when an defense attorney announces that they're going to waive the jury and they want to be tried by a judge, you know you have a problem.
Right.
Yeah. So the defense, their mission is to represent their clients in the best interest. They think they have a better outcome with a judge than with a jury. So keep in mind, judges are elected, and judges are, they're going to raise money. They can't raise money from prosecutors because prosecutors don't make any money. It's going to be the criminal defense bar that they're going to go to. So when we took a look and collected all that data for our judicial accountability report, we noticed the judge trials. So we issued a report 30 days later pointing out the juries in Orleans Parish acquitted offenders in felony cases at a 41% rate. The judges of criminal district court acquitted defendants at a 68% rate.
Wow.
Two judges on the court. One judge acquitted at a 79% rate, and the other judge at an 88% rate. Those two judges had 2/3 of all of the judge trials over a 3-year period of time. So we issued that report, and I'm at a loss of words because I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen what I'm about to tell you. So we issued that report. The judicial administrator for the court wrote me a letter saying that, listen, you were wrong about one judge. The judge that we talked about was the judge in Section I. He had only been on the bench for 1 year, and he had 16 judge trials. That means the defendant went in his section of court, waived the jury, and wanted to be tried. He was acquitting at an 88% rate. So the judicial administrator wrote us a letter saying that that judge had no recourse because the prosecutor in that case didn't call witnesses and didn't present any evidence. Said, I've never heard that. I need to see the transcripts for those trials. So I got the transcripts, and I looked at the transcripts, and I've never seen this before. So you have felony cases that were tried in which the prosecutor, in some instances, requested a continuance, was denied the continuance, but started the trial, called no witnesses, and presented no evidence, and there was an acquittal. Some of the transcripts that I looked at, I read one trial was on October the 31st of last year, Halloween Day. So the defense attorney, as the trial was starting, comments to the judge. This is all in the official court transcript. Judge, I didn't wear my Halloween costume as you suggested that I wear today. And the judge said, that's all right. We're going to find out if this is trick or treat. So suggests that there was already discussions between the defense attorney about this case and the judge. The judge was joking about it. And, the trial commences. The state says, I'm calling officer so-and-so. The deputy in the court calls the officer's name, no response. The prosecutor rests their case. The judge finds them not guilty. I saw another transcript in which the defense attorney, during his opening statement, is, Judge, the state is not going to call any witnesses. The state is not going to introduce any evidence. You're going to have no recourse but to find my client not guilty. That's exactly what transpired. That was 13 times. In 3 of the cases, there were witnesses called, but not the essential witnesses to prove the elements of the crime. But in 13 cases in which the judge issued a not guilty verdict, there was no evidence, no witnesses sworn in. And the judge issued a not guilty verdict. And that was the reason that that letter was written to the Crime Commission saying the judge is exonerated because the prosecution put no evidence on. But again, they're not aware of the law. So under Louisiana law, a trial by judge does not commence until the first witness is sworn in. There were no witnesses sworn in. That wasn't a trial. That wasn't an acquittal. So the prosecutor apparently didn't know that. The judge didn't know that, or he would not have had the judicial administrator write us a letter. So this is a judge that's supposed to be, following the law, and he's ignoring the law. So what we've done is we filed complaints because a prosecutor under the Code of Professional Conduct cannot prosecute a case in which is not supported by probable cause. If you don't have any witnesses, not only can you not establish probable cause, but you can't establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt. When a prosecutor is forced to trial and they don't have the evidence, they have the unilateral authority to dismiss the case. The judge can't do anything about that.
Right.
They didn't do that. So the case went to trial. The prosecutor thought that jeopardy had attached, that was a trial. When I got that letter from the judicial administrator, I immediately called the district attorney's office. They expressed a surprise about it. So they didn't know. Their job is to manage that organization, their assistants. They didn't know that I had to tell them that this was going on. So I filed a complaint with the Judiciary Commission against the judge. I filed a complaint with the Bar Association against the prosecutors. So, that is another aspect of what we do. If we had not framed that issue, this would be perpetuated. It would be an ongoing problem in that court.
So how can we elect better judges when it comes time to vote? I mean, read your report, keep up with the news, but is there a resource when it's time to vote we can go look at some data for ourselves to...
Metrocrime.org.
Okay.
We issue the reports that are out there. We issue reports on the judiciary. We issue reports on the district attorney's office. We issue reports on the sheriff's office and the inmate population. So knowledge is power. The problem that we have, the greatest threat to public safety that I'm convinced that we're facing right now is voter apathy.
Yep.
So people may show up for the general primary, but usually the first place finisher, the people that voted for the first place finisher, think that they don't need to go back and vote because they almost won in the general. So, of course, they're going to win in the runoff. And that has allowed the second place finisher to be elected to office. And when you elect somebody that isn't qualified for that position, you're looking at 4 to 6 years of potential mismanagement that's occurring. And that's the greatest threat to the criminal justice system and public safety. We have public officials, whether
to
it
our
be
entire government.
Exactly. Yeah.
To jump real quick to what's happened at the jail. Is it a lack of resources? Where is that lack of resources?
It's management.
Okay.
It's management. There's always going to be shortages in resources. But, that's a given. That doesn't justify what we're seeing happen right now. This does not happen. The mass escape, the escape last Friday, The sheriff has called it, an inadvertent mistake.
Yeah.
That's being investigated now. So that was the sheriff that turned it an inadvertent mistake. So the person that was inadvertently released was in pretrial custody for a whole litany of crimes of violence. The person that was supposed to have been released was in custody for theft of a stolen firearm. He had one charge on him. He was 20 years old. The person that was inadvertently released was 30 years old, 6'4", 340 pounds, and has an extensive criminal history, including a hold from Jefferson Parish. So the person that was supposed to have been released was Kevin Bryant. The person that was released was Khalil Bryant. So they just don't go by the name when they're making a release. They have photographs of the people. They have date of birth information. They look at the charges. The individual that was inadvertently released had to sign a document. And even if the sheriff deputy was ignorant and unaware and thought that Khalil Bryant was Kevin Bryant, if Kevin Bryant signed as Khalil Bryant, if Kevin Bryant was aware that he was being released on a theft charge as opposed to the litany of crimes of violence, that he didn't disclose that, I believe that makes him culpable as an escapee and possibly falsifying public records in signing documents. So this matter is going to be investigated now by the state police because that was a state police traffic stop arrest that resulted in Khalil Bryant's arrest.
But for those of us that seem like impatient with the investigations and even like the state attorney and what's happening, is there any immediate recourse that the state could do that could make us feel like where our worst are being held are secure?
Yeah, there is, there's a move afoot. After we issued the report on the judiciary, particularly with the judge trials, I was contacted by a state legislator. They want to conduct a hearing to find out how that occurred. There could be legislation. So one of the things that we've been proposing for years is that Louisiana is one of 19 states that gives the defendant the exclusive right to be tried by a judge or jury. 31 other states in the federal government require the concurrence of both the prosecution and the defense. So there is, I think, I've been contacted by legislators. We pointed that out in our report. There's going to be, I think, some legislation that will be introduced in the next session requiring both parties to agree before a jury can be waived. There's also going to, I believe, be some legislation that may be introduced that adds some additional accountability and transparency to the rest of the criminal justice system and the performance of the public officials. But they want us to go up and testify because we're the ones that have developed the evidence and the information. And really, ultimately, if the system is going to be better, what we're doing manually in the city of New Orleans needs to be done statewide for the entire criminal justice system, because if you don't know what's happening behind the curtain, you can't fix it.
Yeah, understood. Last topic, then we'll open up for questions. Project NOLA, nonprofit that shares their camera data with NOPD, was turned off in January following the terrorist attack. What position, if any, do you all have on use of facial recognition cameras, nonprofits sharing that with NOPD? Does that work?
Well, first off, the ordinance that was, ironically, the ordinance that initially was enacted barring the use of facial recognition was sponsored by Jason Williams when he was a council member. Now, as the district attorney, he's in favor of using that information. So
that makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
So, the ordinance that the city passed under Jason Williams and was modified, I believe, in 2020, limits city agencies from using facial recognition.
Okay.
It doesn't impact Project NOLA. Private NOLA is a private entity. They provide the public with free cameras, and they share the data from the cameras with law enforcement. They have more clients than just in the city of New Orleans. And just within the city of New Orleans, Project NOLA camera feeds go to the state police, to the federal government entities. In fact, the comings and goings of the terrorist, bringing the cooler bombs into the quarter, that was Project NOLA cameras that helped law enforcement identify where those coolers were deployed. So Project NOLA has not violated anything. The reason that crime is down in this city, we don't have enough officers. Technology is a force multiplier. So the primary utilization of Project NOLA facial identification and characteristic tracking information is for known wanted subjects. The ordinance that was passed does not preclude the police department from using Project NOLA information unless the police officers requested the information or the city is paying Project NOLA. Project NOLA receives no public funds. They have devised this proprietary software without any input from the police department. They've made this available to all of their law enforcement partners. And actually, the Project NOLA automated notifications were turned off not in January, but in May, after the Washington Post did a story about the fact that the police department may be using prohibited information. That is not what has occurred. I think that was an overreaction. There is a new ordinance that is being drafted and should be heard before the city council that would basically take the handcuffs off the police department and clarify that they absolutely can use automated notifications with respect to known wanted subjects. The reason that what Project NOLA does is when someone gets arrested, they get their booking photo. If a law enforcement agency has an arrest warrant for somebody, they put it in their database. So a known wanted subject means that law enforcement has a warrant for their arrest. They know who they are. They just don't know where they are. Right. Somebody ventures within camera view of a Project NOLA camera, the agencies that are receiving their live feeds will get a notification saying that this wanted subject is at this location. That allows them to arrest the individual, which means that individual isn't on the streets to commit crimes. So that's why crime is down, in large part because the department and the state police have leaned into technology to assist them as a force multiplier and quickly identifying known violent offenders that are walking the streets. They just don't know where they are.
Does that also include NOPD cameras that were installed a few years ago?
No. So that's where the ordinance has to kick in. So we invested millions of dollars in a crime camera network in the city of New Orleans for the Real-Time Crime Center. But because of the city ban, they can't use that type of technology. Project NOLA, as a private entity, that does not apply to them. So here it is, a private entity is assisting law enforcement in arresting the most serious offenders in the community, and the city's own system that they're spending taxpayer dollars on cannot fully utilize and receive the return on investment that they've made in the crime camera network that's deployed all over the city of New Orleans. So Project NOLA cameras are installed on private property. City cameras are deployed on public property. So the Real-Time Crime Center is, all going to be on public property. Private NOLA is, on private property.
But is the Real-Time Crime Center, is it staffed at this point? Can we pull from these cameras, or it's just dormant and we're not?
So the problem is that they have to manually go through the footage. Okay. So after the
even though we have the best technology in the world at this point that could even see that somebody is probably doing something weird by just their body language.
So someone has to be looking at the screens. And if you have dozens of screens up, someone needs to be looking at all those screens. So Project NOLA cameras, the 8th District Police Station and the State Police headquarters in New Orleans, they have banks of cameras up. They sit in their offices and they're looking for drug deals. They're looking for, problems in the crowds and everything. Because they're staffing that, they can go out and use that and deploy. In the real-time crime center, that doesn't happen.
It's all retroactive.
So essentially, after the terrorist attack, the city paid the consultants from New York, Bill Bratton, to come in and review what the city could do to reduce the potential for future terrorist attacks and how to better respond to it. They point out that in the real-time crime center, you don't have enough staffing for everyone to watch the monitors. They suggested automated notifications that when something abnormal happens, there'll be an alert that means that someone's there, can take a look at it, and then that information can be transmitted to law enforcement. That's what's happening with Project NOLA. That's not happening in the city's real-time crime center.
Gotcha. We'll take a couple questions. I know we're a little bit over on time.
How many people how many offenders that come through the commission have been detained or are eligible to be detained by ICE?
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that question. The NOPD and the state police, they're not doing immigration enforcement. If there is somebody that is an illegal immigrant, they're not going to be arrested by the police department or the state police or in the jail unless they have committed a felony offense in the city of New Orleans. So the only illegal immigrants that may be in the jail are people that were arrested for felony offenses perpetrated in the city of New Orleans. So the NOPD and the Louisiana State Police, they have no idea. They're not concerned whether they are legal or illegal immigrants. They're responding to and using their resources to identify felony offenders. So if somebody is in pretrial custody, as an ICE has access to determine who's in pretrial custody, they can place a hold on them. But NOPD and Louisiana State Police are not doing immigration enforcement work.
Guy on, and then we'll be done.
Just want to get your thoughts. We have a mayoral election coming up, and we're just kind of wondering of the candidates who has demonstrated, I guess, the most ability to kind of keep this trend going as far as where we're crime.
So
I know Arthur Hunter is a judge, but
yeah. So I know that Helena Moreno has publicly stated that she would support maintaining and retaining Ann Kirkpatrick as superintendent. She was never supposed to be superintendent. The mayor was going to appoint Michelle Woodfork as the permanent superintendent. She was the interim superintendent. The mayor didn't want to do a national search. She was pressured into doing a national search. The only reason that Ann Kirkpatrick was appointed is because Michelle Woodfork angered the mayor by disciplining the mayor's executive security team member. Vappy.
Which you had a little bit of involvement in.
Yeah, we played a role in that too.
I want to know when the indictment is coming, but we were running out of time here.
So to answer your question, Helena Moreno has gone on record saying that she supports bringing back Ann Kirkpatrick. Oliver Thomas has said that they are in favor, and I have no idea of the rest of the people, but headquarters moved into the building that the Crime Commission is in, 1615 Poydras. And so I'm walking back and forth from my office, and there are officers in the lobby all the time. And they will walk up to me randomly without any prompting from me and say how delighted they are to have Ann Kirkpatrick as their superintendent. It makes a difference who your leader is. She knows what she's doing. So the mayor appointed her as retaliation against Michelle Woodfork. Michelle Woodfork is now running for sheriff. I think that we got lucky with that deal. It worked out well for the city of New Orleans. It's been a game changer for the police department. And, I have no idea who's going to win, but those are the two major candidates that are out there. I think it would be very, very difficult for whoever is elected mayor to say that Ann Kirkpatrick needs to go. As long as she wants to stay, I don't think she's here long term, but I think that she wants to stay on because she knows that she's making a difference, and I'd be thrilled to see her stay. Yes, go ahead.
I just have to ask, there has to be something going on with the trash contract in the French Quarter. I mean, I'm just a layperson, but come on.
Yeah, in fact, on the way over here, they had Sidney Torres on the radio, and then they had Troy Henry on the radio. And, they're both pointing the fingers at one another. But, that is a byproduct of some of the dysfunctionality in government. There should not be this disconnect. So, what's at, the heart of all of this stuff? You have the mayor that is more interested in international travel than she is in staying here and managing government. So, you've got problems that are persisted and, raise their head with respect to mismanagement by the sheriff, by the district attorney, by the judiciary in the city of New Orleans. We finally had the police department on a path that there is a lot less drama, which means the department can focus on what their primary mission is in all of this. So the issues with the with the sanitation contract are just a symptom of the dysfunctionality in our elected public officials.
Is there an investigation?
I don't have any information. We haven't made any referrals, but I don't think we need to make referrals in this. I think the people that have the authority are taking a look at it. The Attorney General has already weighed in on this, and she has criminal jurisdiction.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. I love to hear you speak. Had a question for you. Going back to the jail, we know all about the sheriff, but they talked about the condition of the jail when the escape happened. That building is not that old to have these kind of problems with locks and plumbing and all of these things. I mean, other than the sheriff, who's overseeing the upkeep of those buildings?
That's the sheriff's responsibility. So one of the things, one of the council members, a month and a half ago, did a about the fact that someone gave him a set of keys, right. J.P. Morrell.
Yeah.
And that's what the media seized upon. The fact that he had keys. These inmates didn't get out of custody because they had keys to get out of the jail. But the first thing that JP said in that video was there were over 1,200 open work orders. The reason that escape occurred is because the jail was not being maintained. When you have 1,200 work orders that are open, so the inmates that escaped 2 months ago, they defeated the locks because they clogged the locking mechanisms with toilet paper. So the videos that were out there showed that the escape didn't start. There were supposed to be 2 deputies watching those inmates, one on the tier and the other in the control booth. The deputy on the tier didn't show up for work or wasn't there. The deputy in the control booth prevented the escape from occurring until they went to go eat at about 12:30. When that deputy left the control booth is when the inmates left their cells. Those cells are supposed to be locked for the night. They lock them up at 10:30. They don't open again until 5:30 when breakfast is served. So the fact that those inmates were in closed cells that were not locked, they were not being supervised, meaning that those cells needed to be repaired, and if those repairs were maintained, that escape doesn't occur. If one deputy is there watching, that escape doesn't occur. Those are protocols that are in place by internal policy within the sheriff's office. Failure to follow those protocols set into motion the chain of events that resulted in that escape. So that is the failure. Now, she's running for re-election.
That's crazy.
Again, we'll have to see how that plays out.
Against Michelle.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree. All right, I'll give you the last word. I know we're over here on time.
Wait, I have one question.
Oh, okay.
So, my last question is, how much more has to happen at the jail before something is done about the sheriff herself?
Well, so the only thing that can be done about her is to do a recall election or for her to be voted out of office.
Well, that's what I was
She's up
wondering
for election.
if there's like an
right now.
emergency power by the state.
Nothing. So
Because-
there is, there may be some legislation that may be introduced that allows for other entities to have some supervisory authority to suspend public officials that aren't performing their duties, and then ultimately change the way that, allowing maybe the legislature to remove someone from office after a trial is conducted before. It's sort of like the impeachment process that you see on the federal level.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yep.
All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hope I didn't give you an indigestion. Yep.
Woo! All right. We considered actually starting with all the bad news and going with the good news of the crime. Maybe we did that backwards.
We are
I'm
just
not
so
really
very
sure.
blessed that crime is down.
Crime is down. There is